She walked into the wrong chapel and sat down to disappear. 10 minutes later, the bride tore off her veil and a billionaire reached for Sophia's hand like he'd already decided her life. Sophia kept her shoulders narrow and her chin lowered. The way you do when you're late and embarrassed and trying to become wallpaper. The lavender dress clung at the waist. Riley had insisted. It photographs beautifully, she'd said. Like that was a reason to spend Sophia's rent on satin. Sophia slid into the back pew and pressed her phone into her palm. Screen dark, fingers slick with nervous sweat, stained glass turned late afternoon sunlight into fractured color. Reds and blues skated across polished marble on the backs of people who looked like they belonged in magazines. She did not. Her heels were scuffed. She'd tried to buff them with a tissue on the subway, then given up and cursed under her breath into a shoulder seam dot at the front. A line of bridesmaids stood like a row of champagne flutes, champagne gowns, champagne hair, champagne smiles. Beaded fabric caught the light and threw it back like glitter, not lavender. Sophia's stomach sank. Slow and heavy dot wrong wedding. She tightened her grip on the edge of the pew and forced herself to breathe through her nose like the therapist on a podcast once suggested. Like oxygen could fix the fact that she'd wandered into a ceremony that wasn't hers. She glanced toward the aisle, gauging how hard it would be to slip out without stepping on toes, without drawing attention, without becoming the story. But the organ swelled. Everyone rose as one, smooth and practiced, like they'd rehearsed the motion. Sophia stood because sitting would have been louder. The aisle filled with movement. A bride, tall and sharp as a blade, advanced toward the altar. Her veil shimmered. Her train snapped behind her, pulled taut by fury. Sophia's throat went dry. The bride wasn't floating. She was marching. At the altar, a groom with a pail. Careful face shifted his weight, confusion opening in his expression like a crack in glass. The bride stopped in the center. Aisle. Just stopped. The music continued for a beat, then wavered as the organist faltered, fingers hesitating on keys. The silence that followed was so sudden it sounded like the whole cathedral inhaled. "I can't do this," the bride said. Voice clear, steady, and loud enough to carry to the last row. A collective gasp rose and fell. Like wind through leaves. Sophia froze. Somewhere behind her, a woman whispered a name like a prayer and an accusation at the same time. The groom stepped forward. "Victoria, please." "Not here, especially here." The bride's hands moved to her veil, and with one sharp motion, she ripped it away. Her face was stunning in the way expensive things are crafted. Polished, impossible. But there was nothing polished about her eyes. "I'm not marrying you, Charles," she said. "Not when you've been sleeping with my cousin for 6 months." The words struck like a dropped glass. Someone in the front row made a strangled sound. Someone else laughed once, too high and fast, then covered it with a cough. Charles's face drained. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out that belonged to a man in control of his own life. Sophia's thoughts scattered. She should leave, right now. She slid her foot back, testing space, and realized there wasn't any. The pew was packed. A diamond-studded woman beside her stared forward with the kind of rigid attention that said, "Do not ruin my afternoon." Victoria turned, train sweeping the marble, and began walking back down the aisle, toward the back, toward Sophia. Sophia braced herself, eyes flicking to the side doors, but Victoria's path cut directly in front of her pew, and then Victoria's gaze landed on her. It wasn't a glance. It was a lock. "You," Victoria said, voice slicing through the murmurs. "You're coming with me." Sophia blinked. "I'm sorry." Victoria reached in, seized Sophia's hand, and pulled. The grip was strong, decisive. Like Sophia was a piece on a board, and Victoria had no time for polite negotiation. "I need a witness." Victoria said, dragging her into the aisle. Someone who isn't part of this circus? Sophia's feet stumbled. Her heels clicked too loudly. All eyes swung toward her. She felt the heat of attention crawl up her skin. This is the wrong wedding, Sophia managed, breathless. I'm not. I'm here by mistake. Perfect, Victoria snapped. Then you don't care who gets furious later. Sophia tried to plant her feet, to pull away without making it worse. But the church doors were only a few yards ahead. Bright with late sunlight, Freedom was right there. Then a voice cut through the room like a blade drawn from a sheath. Stop. Everything halted. Victoria's arm went rigid. The whispers died mid-syllable. Sophia turned toward the sound and saw a man step out of the shadow of a stone column near the altar. He moved with calm certainty. No rush, no hesitation. As if silence belonged to him. Tall, broad-shouldered, a black suit that fit like it had been made for the exact angles of his body. His face was controlled in a way Sophia recognized. Not from wealth, but from responsibility, the kind people carry when they're the one expected to fix what everyone else breaks. His eyes were dark, assessing, and when they swept the room, they missed nothing. Victoria's mouth tightened. Damien. The name rolled through the cathedral like a ripple. Familiar to people who read business sections and attended fundraisers. Damien. Blackwood. Sophia had seen the name on headlines she'd scroll past at midnight. Half asleep, thinking, that's a world I'll never touch, he walked down the aisle toward them. Measured, steady. Up close, he was worse, not because he was beautiful, though he was, but because there was something in him that looked like it had been forged by loss and sharpened by necessity. Stopped a few feet away, his gaze moved to Victoria. You're about to make a mistake. The only mistake was agreeing to marry Charles, Victoria said. Damon's eyes flicked to Charles, who looked like he wanted to melt into the altar. Then back to Victoria. There are 400 guests here, Damien said. Important ones. Let them watch, Victoria snapped. Damon's voice stayed calm. If you walk out, your family's reputation takes the hit, not his. Victoria's jaw tightened. She cared. She hated that she cared. Sophia stood between them like a misplaced prop, still held by the hand. Her lavender dress screaming wrong note in a symphony of gold and white. She tried to ease her fingers free. Victoria held tighter. Damon's gaze shifted to Sophia. It hit her like stepping into cold water. Not flirtation. Not charm. Recognition, as if he'd already filed her away as a solution. Who are you? He asked. Sophia swallowed. Nobody. Damon's eyes didn't soften, but something in his focus sharpened. Your name. Sophia hesitated, absurdly aware of the way the entire cathedral watched her mouth. Sophia, she said. Sophia Bennett. Victoria scoffed. She's my witness. Move. Damien ignored Victoria's pull. He looked at Sophia again, and his voice lowered, meant for her alone. But in the silence, it felt like everyone could hear it anyway. You don't belong here, he said. No, Sophia whispered. I'm supposed to be at a different wedding. His gaze dropped to her dress, her shoes, the cheap purse on her wrist that had held her MetroCard and lip balm, and 3 loose quarters. Then back to her face. I need you to do something, he said. Sophia let out a breath that tasted like incense. I'm not doing anything. I'm leaving. Damien turned his head slightly, addressing the room with a voice that carried without effort. My cousin Charles's engagement to Victoria Montgomery is terminated, he said. Crisp final. Charles made a sound, but it died in his throat when Damien looked at him. The authority in that look wasn't loud. It was absolute. Damien faced the guests again. We will not waste this ceremony. We will not insult our guests. His gaze returned to Sophia, and I will not let this day become a spectacle without an ending. Sophia's heart pounded so hard she felt it in her teeth. "No," she said, loud enough this time to be heard. "Absolutely not. Whatever you're thinking, it's not happening." Damien stepped closer, stopping just inside her space. He smelled like clean soap and something darker underneath wood. Spice, restraint. He lowered his voice. "You're already in the aisle? That's not. I'm offering you a way out of being the footnote in someone else's scandal." Sophia's laugh came out thin. "A way out would be letting go of my hand and letting me leave." Damien's eyes held hers. Then he said it, quiet and clear, like he'd practiced. "Marry me." Sophia stared at him. For a second, she was sure she'd misheard, that the organ pipes had rattled something in her brain. Victoria let out a harsh breath. "Damien, no." Damien didn't look at Victoria Dot. He kept his eyes on Sophia, like the rest of the cathedral had vanished. "Not you," he said to Victoria, still watching Sophia. Her. Sophia's stomach flipped. "No," she said again, firmer, because if she didn't anchor herself, she might float right out of her own body. "I don't know you." "You don't need to," Damien said. "That is not how marriage works." "It can," he said, and then his mouth tightened, the barest edge of humor. "In certain worlds." Sophia's voice dropped. "What is this really?" Damien's gaze didn't waver. "My grandmother's will requires I be married by my 35th birthday," he said. 2 weeks from now." Sophia's breath caught. She knew the tone of a man saying something he hated admitting. "And if you don't?" she asked, because her mouth was moving even though her common sense was waving a red flag the size of Manhattan. "Control of my company passes to my uncle," Damien said. "He will dismantle it. People will lose jobs. The work my family built dies." Sophia felt the weight of it, heavy and real. Not romantic or dramatic, but practical and brutal. Damien looked down at her hand, still trapped between Victoria's grip and his proximity. "You need money," he said softly. Sophia stiffened. "Excuse me?" His gaze flicked to her purse, her shoes, the tightness around her eyes that exhaustion etched into skin. "Not judgment, assessment. I'm not insulting you," he said. "I'm seeing you." Sophia's throat tightened anyway. Damon's voice stayed even. 1 year. Separate bedrooms if you want them. Clear terms. And when it ends, you walk away with enough to change your life. Sophia's mind flashed rent notices, overdraft fees, her mother's tired voice. Riley's face when she begged for help with the bridesmaid dress deposit. "What are you offering?" Sophia whispered. Damien leaned in just enough that only she could hear the number. Sophia's knees went weak. The cathedral blurred at the edges. Rows of faces melting into stained glass light. She heard her own breath. Fast and shallow. She heard Damon's voice again. Steady as stone. And she realized, with a jolt that scared her more than the money, that he wasn't asking as a fantasy. He was asking as a solution. Sophia looked at his face, controlled, burdened, impossibly calm, and felt the strangest pull. Not attraction. Not yet. Something older. The feeling of standing at the edge of a life you didn't plan. With a door open and no guarantee you'll survive the step. Victoria's grip on her hand loosened. Just slightly, as if even she wanted to see what Sophia would do. Sophia swallowed, eyes burning. If she said yes, she would be stepping into a world where she didn't know the rules. If she said no, she would walk back into her own life unchanged, safe, small, and familiar. Damon's eyes didn't beg. They waited. Sophia stared at their joined hands and wondered, not for the first time in her life, whether the chance to start over ever arrives politely, or if it always comes like this, sudden and terrifying. With everyone watching, Sophia didn't answer right away, not because she was trying to be dramatic, because her mind was doing what it always did when panic hit, trying to make a list. trying to find the exit, trying to calculate the safest next step. Damien Blackwood stood in front of her like a door that had already swung open. Behind him, 400 faces waited to see what kind of woman said yes to it too. Billionaire in a cathedral that wasn't hers. Sophia's fingers tingled where Victoria had held them. Damon's gaze stayed on her, steady and unreadable, like he'd already accepted the risk of asking. Sophia forced air into her lungs. "You're serious," she said, and her voice sounded smaller than she wanted. "I wouldn't say it out loud if I wasn't," Damien replied. Victoria's laugh came out sharp. "Damien, stop. This is insane." Sophia looked at Victoria, fury, relief, and humiliation all braided together in her expression. Then she looked back at Damien. "You don't know me." Sophia said, "I know enough," he said quietly. "That's not comforting." "I'm not trying to comfort you," Damien said. "I'm offering you terms." Terms. The word landed in Sophia's chest like a cold coin. She had spent most of her adult life taking terms she didn't love. Rent terms, loan terms, job terms, the silent terms of being the one who was always fine because falling apart was a luxury. Damon's voice lowered. "Meant for her alone. I can make this clean," he said. "Or you can walk out and become the woman in the lavender dress who wandered into a scandal and fled." Sophia's cheeks heated. "That's manipulative." "It's realistic," Damien corrected. Sophia's eyes flicked toward the doors. Sunlight spilled through them like a promise. A few steps and she could be outside. Swallowed by Manhattan, back to her messy, ordinary life. But her phone vibrated in her palm like a heartbeat. Riley. Where are you?" Sophia's mouth went dry. She imagined Riley at the other end of the cathedral maze. The kind of friend who'd forgive a lot, but not being abandoned on her wedding day. Sophia squeezed her eyes shut for half a second. When she opened them, Damien was still there. Waiting. Not pleading. Waiting like a man who had built his life on the assumption that waiting produced results. Sophia swallowed. "I want to talk privately," she said. Damien nodded once. "Of course." Victoria's brows shot up. "You're actually entertaining this?" Sophia turned toward her, voice tight. "I'm entertaining getting out of here alive." Damien angled his body slightly, not touching her, but guiding. He didn't grab her wrist. He didn't push. He simply moved in a way that made space for her to follow. Sophia hated herself a little for how instinctively she did. They stepped into a side chapel off the main nave. The change in sound was immediate, muffled murmurs instead of a roar, candlelight instead of stained glass brilliance. Sophia's pulse was still a drumbeat in her ears. Damien shut the door gently behind them. Victoria followed, arms crossed, jaw tight, for the first time since Sophia had stumbled into the wrong chapel. The world felt small enough to breathe. Sophia turned to Damien. "Tell me exactly what you're asking." Damien didn't hesitate. 1 year, he said. A legal marriage. Public appearances as needed. Discretion, consistency. Sophia stared at him. "And after 1 year, a clean divorce," Damien said. "No games." Sophia let out a shaky breath. "That's insane." "Yes," Damien said. "But it's also efficient." Victoria rolled her eyes. "You're going to propose efficiency at an altar, Damien?" Damien's gaze flicked to Victoria. "We're not here for commentary." Victoria's lips pressed together, but she didn't argue. Sophia looked back at Damien. "You said you'd give me money." Damien's expression stayed composed. 7 million. Sophia's mind snagged on the number like a hook. 7 million. She could pay off her loans. She could move her mother out of that small Pennsylvania house with the leaky roof. She could quit the job that kept her at her desk until her eyes blurred. She could breathe. without flinching at every notification. From her bank, Sophia heard her own voice, thin and disbelieving. Why me? Damien's gaze dropped briefly to her dress, her shoes, the purse she'd bought on sale at Target because it had sturdy stitching dot, then back to her face. You're not connected to my world, he said. Which makes you safer. Sophia stiffened. Safer for who? For both of us, Damien replied. No family politics. No social ambitions. No competing agendas. Sophia's voice sharpened. You think I don't have ambitions? Damien's eyes didn't flinch. I think you have them. I think you've had to postpone them. The words hit too close. Sophia's throat tightened. She looked away, pretending she was studying the candles, the wood pews, the delicate carving along the altar rail. Anything but the fact that he'd read. Her in less than a minute, Victoria's voice cut in, lower now. Damien, you can't guarantee she won't sell this story. Sophia snapped her head toward Victoria. I'm standing right here. Victoria held up a hand. And I'm not calling you a bad person. I'm calling you a stranger in a room full of sharks. Damien's gaze stayed on Sophia. Would you? Sophia stared at him. There was no warmth in the question. No charm. Just a simple ask. Like he'd rather know now if he was about to step on a landmine. No, Sophia said. I wouldn't. Why not? Damien asked. Sophia's laugh came out bitter. Because I'd like to sleep at night? Because I'm not interested in destroying someone's life for headlines? Because I don't want to be that person. Damien watched her for a long beat. Then he nodded once, as if he'd just checked a box. Sophia hated that she wanted his approval. She forced herself back onto practical ground. Okay, she said. Say I agree. How does this work today? Damien's answer came immediately. We finished the ceremony, he said. We leave as a married couple. Sophia's eyes widened. Today, yes. This is a cathedral, Sophia said, incredulous. There are people out there who will repeat this story for the next 10 years, Damien finished. Which is why we need control of it. Sophia's mind flashed to camera phones, social feeds, news alerts. She felt dizzy. And what about my life? Sophia asked. My job. My apartment. My friend's wedding I was actually supposed to be in. Damien's gaze sharpened at the last part. You were supposed to be a bridesmaid? Sophia nodded. Riley, she's going to murder me. Damien's mouth moved like it was considering a smile and thought better of it. You can call her after. That's not good enough, Sophia said, panic rising. It's the only option, Damien said. If you leave now, you're a mystery woman dragged into the aisle by a runaway bride. If you stay, you become my wife. The narrative changes. Narrative, Sophia repeated, disgusted. You talk about this like it's a press conference. Damien's gaze didn't waver. It will be. Victoria let out a low exhale. He's not wrong. Sophia rubbed her forehead with the heel of her hand. Could feel her mascara threatening to smudge. Body wanted to bolt, but her mind kept circling the number .7 million and the fact that Damien Blackwood wasn't asking because he wanted romance. He was asking because he needed a solution. Sophia had been someone's solution before. She'd been the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who fixed things, who covered shifts, who nodded and smiled and made it work. But this was different. This was her life. Sophia looked at Damien. I have conditions. Damien's expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened. Name them. Separate bedrooms, Sophia said quickly. No intimacy we don't both agree to. And I mean that, no expectations, no pressure, no, we're married, so Damien nodded once. Agreed. Sophia blinked. She'd expected an argument. She pushed on. I keep my job, she said. I'm not becoming a decorative wife who sits around and pretends to enjoy brunch fundraisers. I'll need you at some events, Damien said, but you'll have notice, and you can refuse anything that crosses a line for you. Sophia's jaw tightened, and when it ends, it ends. No trying to extend it. No guilt, no drama, no trapping me. Damien's gaze held hers, unflinching. No trapping, he said. 1 year. Clean exit. You have my word. Victoria stared at Damien like she was seeing him for the first time. Damien, Victoria muttered, who are you today? He didn't look at her. Sophia's voice dropped. And the money? Damien reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He typed with fast, confident movements. Then angled the screen toward her. A document, a contract. Her heart lurched. You have this ready, she said. Stunned, I prepare for contingencies. Damien replied. Sophia stared at the screen, barely registering the legal language. Only the numbers .7 million the terms the 1 year timeline . It looked cold, and official and terrifyingly real. Sophia's hands shook. Victoria leaned in, eyes scanning. This is absurdly thorough. Damien's gaze stayed on Sophia. I'm not asking you to decide blind. I'm asking you to decide now. Sophia felt the walls of the chapel close in, not physically emotionally the way choice does when it demands an answer. Brain supplied a dozen reasons to say no. Her life supplied a dozen reasons to say yes. Sophia's voice came out small. Why would you trust me? Damien's eyes softened by a fraction, the smallest crack in his armor. Because you're terrified, he said quietly. And you're still standing here. Sophia's throat burned. She didn't like being seen. Being seen meant someone could judge the parts she worked so hard to hide. The poor parts, the desperate parts, the lonely parts. Victoria shifted, suddenly uncomfortable. If you do this, you're stepping into a world that eats women alive. Sophia looked at her. That's comforting. Victoria's expression flickered. It's honest. Sophia turned back to Damien. He stood steady, patient, hands at his sides like he was offering. Not taking. Sophia tried to picture the rest of her life if she walked out. Work, rent, exhaustion, the same cycle. Just tighter each year. Then she pictured a year with Damien. Blackwood. A year in a world she didn't understand. A year of pretending. A year of pressure. And the kind of money that could buy her mother rest, could buy Sophia the freedom to choose something other than survival. Sophia closed her eyes. When she opened them, Damien was still waiting. Sophia inhaled. This is insane, she said. Damien's voice was quiet. Yes. Sophia swallowed hard. Then, with a steadiness she didn't feel, she said the words anyway. Fine. Victoria's eyes widened. Sophia cut her off, voice trembling now but still firm. Fine, I'll do it. The chapel went silent, even with the muffled noise beyond the door. Damien didn't smile. He simply nodded, as if something heavy had just clicked into place. Good, he said. Then we need to move quickly. Sophia's pulse spiked. Move quickly to do what? Damien stepped toward the door. To marry you, he said, calm as gravity. In front of everyone waiting for this day to become a disaster. Sophia's fingers curled around her phone, like a lifeline. Her screen lit again. Another text from Riley. The wedding started. Where are you? Sophia stared at it, chest tight, the weight of her choice settling in her bones. Damien opened the chapel door. Sound spilled in, murmurs. Shifting bodice, the scrape of shoes on marble. Victoria hovered at Sophia's shoulder. Voice low. You understand, Victoria said, that once you walk back out there, You don't get to be invisible again. Sophia looked at the doorway, looked at the light beyond it, looked at Damien's broad back. Already moving like this was simply the next item on his list. She took one breath, then another, and stepped forward, wondering if she'd just bought her freedom or handed someone else the keys to her life. The doors opened, and the sound hit her first stop, not applause. Not yet. Just the low murmur of hundreds of people trying to understand what they were about to witness. Sophia stepped back into the nave with Damien beside her. The marble cool under her thin solace, the weight of the cathedral pressing down like expectation. Every face turned. She felt it physically. The way attention can tighten around your ribs. Damien didn't reach for her hand right away. He walked half a step ahead, not dragging her, not abandoning her, positioning himself like a shield without making it obvious. It was oddly reassuring. Victoria broke away, heading toward the front with her chin lifted, dignity reclaimed even in retreat. Somewhere behind them, Charles stood frozen, a man whose life had imploded while he watched. Sophia's pulse roared in her ears. "This feels illegal," she murmured. "It's not," Damien said quietly. "Unconventional, yes. Illegal, no. That's not comforting. It's honest." They reached the front. Father Morrison stood near the altar, hands clasped too tightly, eyes darting between them like he was afraid someone might start shouting again. "Mr. Blackwood," he said carefully, "perhaps we should take a moment. We don't have that luxury," Damien said politely. "But thank you." Sophia swallowed. This was happening, not in theory, not in some distant, manageable future. Now. Damien turned to her, finally taking her hand. His palm was warm, steady, anchoring. "You can still walk away," he said under his breath. "No one will stop you." She looked at him, really looked at him. At the faint line between his brows. The controlled stillness that wasn't arrogance but habit. At a man who had clearly learned early that hesitation cost too much. "If I walk away," she said, "this becomes a story about the woman who panicked." "Yes. And if I stay, then it becomes a story about us." Sophia huffed a breath. "You're very good at reframing." "I had an excellent teacher," Damien said. "My grandmother believed panic was a waste of energy." Sophia thought of her own mother, working double shifts, never panicking because there wasn't time. She squared her shoulders. "Okay," she said. "Then let's do this before I change my mind." Damien's grip tightened just slightly. They turned to face Father Morrison. The murmurs swelled, then fell as Damien lifted his free hand, not dramatic, just enough to claim attention. "Thank you for your patience," he said, voice carrying without effort. "There has been a change in today's ceremony." Sophia's heart pounded. "This is not the wedding you expected," Damien continued calmly. "But it is a real one." A ripple moved through the pews. Damien looked down at Sophia then. "Not performative, not for them. For the record," he said quietly, "are you still willing?" She nodded once. "Yes." He turned back to the priest. "We'd like to proceed." Father Morrison hesitated, then exhaled like a man stepping off a cliff with faith instead of a parachute. "Very well," he said. "Then let us begin." The organ started again, softer now. Unsure of itself, Sophia stood at the altar where she'd never imagined she'd be, next to a man she'd met less than an hour ago, wearing a borrowed dress and borrowed courage. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She ignored it. "Father." Morrison spoke words Sophia had heard before at weddings she attended as a guest, sipping champagne and whispering commentary. Now they landed differently. "Marriage is a sacred bond." Sophia almost laughed at the irony. Damien squeezed her hand gently, as if sensing the tremor in her breath. She glanced at him. His gaze was forward, but his thumb brushed once over her knuckles, a small, grounding gesture. The priest asked Damien to speak. "I do," Damien said, steady, unhesitating. Sophia's chest tightened. Then Father Morrison turned to her. Sophia felt the moment stretch. This was the point of no return. Do, she said. Her voice didn't crack. Was proud of that. The priest nodded, visibly relieved, and continued. When the moment came when Father Morrison said the words she'd half expected to sound. Unreal. Sophia felt the room tilt. I now pronounce you husband and wife. A breath passed through the cathedral. You may kiss the bride. Sophia's eyes widened. She hadn't thought this far. Damien turned toward her slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted. Is this okay? He murmured. That he asked, that he didn't. Assume loosened something tight in her chest. Yes, she whispered. Leaned in. The kiss was brief. Gentle. Careful. Not. The kind that sparked fireworks, but the kind that acknowledged presence, like a promise made without embellishment. When he pulled back, the applause came, polite at first, then louder. Sophia blinked, overwhelmed. Damien turned to face the guests, her hand still in his. Thank you, he said. My wife and I appreciate your understanding. My wife, the words echoed in Sophia's head. They walked down the aisle. Together. Not rushed. Not triumphant. Measured. As if this were just another step in a day that had already demanded too much. Outside, the light had shifted. Late afternoon bled into early evening. The sky bruised with pink and gold. Sophia squinted as cameras flashed. The crowd surged, voices overlapping. Who is she? Did you know about this? Mr. Blackwood, a statement? Damien's hand pressed lightly at her back, guiding her forward. Smile, he murmured. Just enough. She did. It felt strange on her face. A black car waited at the curb. Door already open. Damien ushered her in, then followed. The door closing on the noise and the chaos. Silence. Sophia sagged back against the leather seat. Breath shaky. I think, she said faintly. I just married you. Damien glanced at her. Yes, he said. You did. She laughed once, breathless. I don't even know your middle name, Alexander. Of course it is. He almost smiled. The car pulled away. Sophia stared out the window at the city she'd known her whole life. Now suddenly unfamiliar, her phone buzzed again. She looked this time. Riley. Sophia. Why are you? Trending. Sophia closed her eyes. Damien watched her. Something unreadable crossing his face. Friends? He asked. My best friend, Sophia said. She's getting married today. Damien paused. That means you understand you just ruined my life. It means, Damien said carefully, we should call her before she finds out from someone else. Sophia looked at him. You're very calm for someone who just married a stranger. I plan for chaos, Damien said. But I don't enjoy hurting people. That surprised her. The car turned onto a quieter street. Sophia drew in a breath, then let it out slowly. So, she said, staring ahead. What happens now? Damien leaned back, gaze fixed on the darkening skyline. Now, he said, we go home. Home. The word settled between them, heavy and unfinished. Sophia swallowed. And where exactly is that? Damien looked at her then, really looked at her, like he was measuring the weight of what he was about to say. My penthouse, he said. And Sophia, yes? For the next year, Damien said evenly. Everything about this needs to look real. Sophia's pulse jumped. And what if, she asked quietly, it starts to feel real? Damien didn't answer right away. The city lights reflected in his eyes. Sharp and distant, that, he said finally, is the one thing neither of us can afford. Sophia didn't sleep. She lay on her side in the backseat of a car that smelled like leather and quiet money, watching Manhattan slide past the tinted windows like a life she'd stepped out of and into at the same time. Damien sat across from her. Jacket off now, sleeves rolled, his attention split between his phone and the city ahead. He typed with the ease of someone used to being obeyed by screens. And people alike, she wondered who he was texting. Assistants, lawyers, someone. Who knew how to clean up chaos. Not wives. The word still felt. Unreal. The car slowed, then turned. Sophia felt the shift more than she saw it, the way the city noise dulled and the streets grew wider. Cleaner, quieter. The building rose ahead of them. Glass and steel catching the last of the evening light. She craned her neck. That's not an apartment building, she said. Damien glanced up. It is. That's a corporate headquarters. It's mixed use. Sophia let out a weak laugh. Of course it is. The car pulled to a private entrance. A doorman stepped forward immediately, opening the door before Sophia had even reached for the handle. Good evening, Mr. Blackwood, he said smoothly. His gaze flicked to Sophia without curiosity, without judgment. Welcome home. Home. Damien stepped out first, then offered his hand. Sophia hesitated only a beat before taking it. Her fingers looked small in his. The lobby was all marble and muted light. Art on the walls that looked expensive enough to require security rather than dusting. Everything was hushed, reverent, like the building itself expected good behavior. They crossed the floor without stopping. A private elevator waited. Doors already open. Sophia stepped inside and felt the faint pressure in her ears as they rose. She stared at the glowing numbers. Climbing past floors she couldn't imagine living. On .30, .40, .50, she exhaled slowly when the doors opened. There was no hallway, just a living room, no more than a living room. A space so wide it stole her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the room. The city spread below them in 1,000 blinking lights. Sophia took a step forward without meaning to. Oh, she said. Damien watched her reaction. Something like relief flickering across his face. Welcome, he said. This is home. Sophia moved closer to the windows. Cars looked like toys from this height. People like ideas. Her entire apartment could fit inside this room. Maybe twice. She pressed her palm to the glass. I can see the river, she murmured. Yes, Damien said. On clear nights, you can see past it. She turned back to him. You live here alone? Yes, the answer came too quickly. Sophia nodded, absorbing the weight of that. The space was immaculate, but not cold. Books lined one wall, real ones, not decorative. A telescope stood near the window. There were throw blankets folded on the couch, slightly uneven, like someone actually used them. This is not what I expected, she said. Damien tilted his head. What did you expect? Something louder, she admitted. More obvious? His mouth curved faintly. I prefer quiet. She believed him. Damien gestured down a hallway. I'll show you a room. My room, Sophia repeated, following him. Right. The guest room was larger than her old bedroom, with its own bathroom and a view that made her dizzy. A neatly folded robe lay on the bed. She touched it, half afraid it would dissolve. You can change, Damien said. I'll order food. Pizza? She smiled despite herself. Still pizza? Yes, then yes. He paused at the door. Sophia. She looked up. If at any point tonight you want space, he said, say so. I won't be offended. The fact that he said it plainly, without posturing, settled her nerves more than she expected. Thank you, she said, when he left. She sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence settle. Her phone buzzed. Immediately. Riley. She stared at the screen for a long moment before answering the call. Sophia Marie Bennett. Riley said the second she picked up. Explain. Sophia winced. Hi, you missed my wedding, I know. You married a billionaire. I know. There are pictures, I know. A pause. then softer. Are you okay? That nearly ended her. I think so, Sophia said. I'm processing. Riley exhaled. You better have a good explanation. I do, Sophia said carefully. Just not one I can give over the phone. Another pause. Are you safe? Riley asked out. Sophia looked around the room, the city beyond the windows, the locked door. Yes, she said. I am, okay, Riley said. Then we'll talk tomorrow. And Sophia, yes? You look happy in the photos, Riley said. Terrified, but happy. Sophia closed her eyes. Good night, she said, when she hung up. Her hands were shaking. She changed into the robe and padded back into the living room. Damien was there. Sleeves rolled higher now, leaning against the kitchen island while speaking quietly into his phone. Yes, he said. Tonight. Tomorrow morning for the press. No interviews yet? He glanced at Sophia and ended the call. Everything okay? He asked. She nodded. I think so. Pizza arrived minutes later, delivered by someone who didn't blink at the address. They ate at the kitchen island, not touching, not rushing. It felt strangely normal. This is surreal, Sophia said finally. Damien took a sip of water. It will feel that way for a while, and after that, it becomes routine, he said, which can be comforting or dangerous. She studied him. You speak from experience. With pressure, he corrected. Not marriage. She smiled faintly. When they finished eating, Damien stood. I'll let you rest, he said. Tomorrow will be busy, Sophia nodded. Good night, Damien. Good night, Sophia. She watched him walk down the hall, disappear into his room. The door closed softly. Sophia returned to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there was her old life. Up here was a man she didn't know, a marriage she hadn't planned, and a year that could change everything. She pressed her forehead to the glass. She had wanted a second chance at something, at security, at possibility. She just hadn't expected it to come with vows. And as the city hummed below, Sophia wondered not whether she could survive this year, but whether she'd recognize herself when it was over. Sophia woke to quiet, not the rattling of the radiator or Carla's alarm bleeding through a wall, not traffic or sirens or the upstairs neighbor pacing. Just silence. For a moment, she didn't move. She lay still beneath unfamiliar sheets, staring at a ceiling that was too high, too clean, too far away to belong to her old life. Then memory rushed in. The cathedral, the kiss, the car, the penthouse, Damien. Her stomach flipped. She sat up slowly, the robe falling open at the knee, morning light spilling across polished floors. The city outside the windows looked different in daylight, less dramatic, more real. People going to work, coffee cups in hand, lives continuing, unaware that hers had cracked open overnight. Sophia swung her feet to the floor. Cold stone grounded her. She padded toward the window, resting her palms on the glass. From this height, the city felt orderly, predictable, a grid of intention. She envied it. A knock sounded behind her, not loud, not tentative. Controlled. Sophia turned. Yes. The door opened just enough for Damon's face to appear. Good morning, he said. Did I wake you? No, she replied honestly. I was already awake. He stepped inside, carrying 2 coffee cups and a folded newspaper. He'd changed dark jeans, a sweater, no jacket. He looked human, less like a headline. I didn't know how you take your coffee, he said. So I guessed. She accepted the cup. You guessed right. He nodded, as if filing that away. They stood there for a second, both holding coffee, neither quite sure where to sit. The awkwardness was subtle but unmistakable. A married couple who had skipped the part where you learn how to exist together. Sophia gestured toward the couch. We should probably talk. Yes, Damien agreed. We should. They sat at opposite ends. Space between them like a buffer neither had named, but both respected. Damien folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside. I've already spoken with my legal team, he said. The marriage license is filed. Everything from yesterday is official. Sophia nodded. Okay, there will be press inquiries today, he continued. My assistant will handle most of them. You won't be required to speak unless you want to. I don't, Sophia said quickly. A corner of his mouth lifted. Noted. He took a sip of coffee. We also need to discuss boundaries. Sophia straightened slightly. Yes, definitely. I want to be clear, Damien said. This arrangement only works if you feel safe. The word caught her attention. Safe, she repeated. Yes, he said. Not managed. Not controlled. Safe. She studied him. He wasn't posturing. If anything, he looked cautious. That matters to you? She asked. It has to, Damien replied. If this becomes coercive, it fails. And I don't do failing systems. Sophia huffed a small laugh. You really see everything as a system? Everything eventually is, he said. Including relationships. She considered that. That's sad. He didn't deny it. Which brings us to expectations, Damien said. Publicly, we are a married couple. Privately, we are learning. Learning what? Sophia asked. How to coexist, he said. Without resentment. She nodded slowly. I can work with that. He reached for a folder on the coffee table she hadn't noticed before. Contract, he said. Updated. 10 million. Sophia nearly spilled her coffee. 10? She echoed. You said 7? I revised it, Damien said calmly. Overnight. Why? Because you didn't negotiate, he said. And because you made a life-altering decision under pressure. She stared at him. You didn't have to do that, I know. Then why? Because I don't want you wondering 6 months from now if you sold yourself short, Damien said. Or resenting me for it? Something warm and uncomfortable settled in her chest. Damien, she said quietly, this is more money than I can even conceptualize. I'm aware, he said. That's the point. She exhaled. I'll have a lawyer look at it. Of course, he said. Take your time. A pause stretched between them. May I ask you something? Sophia said double quotes yes. Why didn't you already have someone? She asked. Someone willing to do this? Damon's gaze shifted to the window. I did, he said after a moment. Years ago. Sophia waited. She left, he continued. Not because she didn't love me, but because she was tired of competing with the company. That sounds lonely, Sophia said. It was, Damien replied. And instructive, she absorbed that. Do you miss her? Sophia asked, gently. He considered the question. I miss who I was when I believed I could have both. Sophia felt that settle deep. They sat in silence again, but it was different now. Less awkward, more weighted. Logistics, Damien said finally. You'll need clothes suitable for public events. My assistant can help. I don't want to lose myself, Sophia said. I won't become someone unrecognizable. You won't, Damien said firmly. And if anyone tries to turn you into something you're not, I'll shut it down. She studied his face. Why are you so certain? Because I don't need a prop, he said. I need a partner who can stand beside me without shrinking. Her throat tightened. Okay, she said. Then here's mine. Go on. I won't lie to you, Sophia said. About how I feel. About when this gets hard? Damien nodded. Agreed. And if either of us starts wanting more than this arrangement allows, she added, we say it out loud. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was steady. Yes. The honesty in that answer scared her more than if he'd refused. A soft buzz interrupted them. Damien glanced at his phone. Press has confirmed. We're trending. Sophia grimaced. Of course we are. You'll need to meet my assistant later today, Damien said, and we'll go over the public story. She nodded. When do I see my apartment? Today, he said. I'll have a driver take you. You can pack what you need. Relief washed through her. Thank you. Damien stood. There's one more thing. She looked up. My uncle will test this, he said. He will look for cracks. Sophia swallowed. And if he finds them? Damien's eyes met hers, steady and intent. Then we hold, he said. Together. Together. The word echoed in her mind long after he left the room. Sophia finished her coffee alone, staring out at the city. Somewhere between those streets was the woman she'd been yesterday. Somewhere up here was the woman she was becoming. She didn't know yet which one would survive this year, but as she stood, robe tied tight, heart thudding with equal parts fear and resolve, one truth settled clearly in her chest. She hadn't just married into wealth. She'd married into a test, and whether she passed or failed would depend not on how convincing the story looked, but on how much of herself she was. Willing to risk keeping, Sophia packed slowly, not because she had much to bring, but because every item felt like a small decision about who she still was. Her laptop went in the suitcase first. That was non-negotiable. Her camera followed, old, scratched, still reliable. A few dresses she wore to work, jeans softened by years of washing, sweaters that smelled faintly like her old detergent. She stood in the doorway of her apartment bedroom for a long moment, eyes moving over the space she'd slept in for 3 years, the chip dresser, the crooked lamp, the photo of her mother taped to the mirror because the frame had broken. This room had held her through late nights and bad news, and the quiet pride of surviving on her own. She ran her hand over the doorframe, then turned away before nostalgia could talk her into staying. The driver waited downstairs, polite and silent. The city felt closer at street level, louder, more forgiving. Sophia glanced up once at the penthouse tower rising in the distance, then looked back at the sidewalk like she belonged there. Because she still did. The ride back was quieter than the first dot she watched people through the window, couples arguing softly, a man talking to his dog like it was a person, a woman in heels laughing into her phone. Normal life. At the building. The doorman greeted her by name. Mrs. Blackwood. The title still startled her. Inside the penthouse, Damien was on a call, voice low and controlled. He glanced up as she entered, nodded once, and finished quickly. All set? He asked. She nodded. As much as I'll ever be. He gestured toward the suitcase. I'll have it taken to your room. Thank you. There was a pause. Do you want to eat? Damien asked. Or would you rather rest? She considered it. Eat, but something simple. Pizza again? She smiled faintly. You're learning. His mouth curved just slightly. They ate at the table this time, city lights beginning to flicker on as dusk settled in. The conversation stayed light-safe territory. Music preferences. Which neighborhoods felt most like home? The mutual hatred of small talk at formal events. Sophia found herself relaxing despite her instincts. After dinner, Damien cleared the plates without comment. You don't have staff? She asked. I do, he said. But not always. I like knowing how my own kitchen works. She appreciated that more than she expected. Later, as the night deepened, Sophia stood at the window again, watching reflections overlap her face. The city, the room behind her. Damien joined her. Not too close. You'll have privacy here, he said. But you won't be invisible? I'm used to invisible, she admitted. He looked at her. I won't let that happen here. The promise lingered between them. She turned to him. What happens if this changes? His gaze didn't waver. Then we adjust. That sounds like a business answer. It is, he said. But it doesn't mean it's untrue. Sophia nodded, unsure whether that reassured her or unsettled her more. She excused herself a little later, retreating to her room. The bed was too soft. The silence too complete. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the city through thick glass. Somewhere down the hall, Damien moved quiet steps, a door opening, then closing. A married couple. Learning the shape of each other's presence, Sophia turned onto her. Sighed. She had wanted security. She had wanted a second chance. She just hadn't expected them to arrive wearing the same. Faced out as sleep finally crept in, one thought surfaced. Uninvited and persistent, this year was supposed to be pretend, but already it felt like something that would leave marks. The next morning arrived with schedules. Sophia discovered this before she'd finished her coffee. Damon's assistant, Elena, arrived promptly at 9. She was composed, efficient, and kind in the way of someone who had learned how to manage powerful people without becoming small around them. Elena carried a tablet and a garment bag. Good morning, Mrs. Blackwood, she said smoothly. Sophia flinched, then smiled. Good morning. Damien stood nearby, jacket already on, watching Sophia more than the conversation. This won't take long, Elena said. Just an overview. An overview turned out to be a list, a long one, press strategy. Public appearances, wardrobe planning, security adjustments, social expectations. Sophia listened, nodding, absorbing. This wasn't malicious. It was organized, necessary, but halfway through, something in her chest tightened. I need to stop you, Sophia said. Elena paused immediately. Of course. Sophia took a breath. I understand the need for planning, but I'm not an asset. Damon's head turned sharply. Elena blinked, then nodded. Understood. Sophia continued, voice steady. I will participate. I will learn. But I need space to still be... Damien watched her carefully. That's fair, he said after a beat. Adjust accordingly. Elena made a note without hesitation. Of course. The meeting wrapped quickly after that. When Elena left, the apartment felt quieter again. Sophia exhaled. That was intense. Yes, Damien said. It was... She looked at him. You didn't stop her. I wanted to see what you would do, he admitted, and you held your ground without burning the room, he said. That matters. She didn't know whether to feel flattered or evaluated. Probably both. Later, they rode down together in the elevator. Damien was headed to the office. Sophia was scheduled to meet a stylist. They stood side by side, not touching, reflections overlapping in the mirrored walls. Are you okay? Damien asked. I think so, Sophia said. Ask me again in 6 months. He nodded. I will. The doors opened. He stepped out first, then paused. Sophia, he said. She looked up. If at any point this becomes too much, he said, voice low, you tell me. She studied his face. And you'll let me walk away? No, he said honestly. I'll try to fix it first. She considered that. Fair, she said. The day blurred. Fabric samples. Shoes she'd never worn. A mirror that reflected a woman she barely recognized, polished, elegant, almost convincing. By evening, her head ached. She returned to the penthouse exhausted, heels in hand, hair pulled loose. Damien was already home. He'd loosened his tie. Jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled. How was it? He asked. Overwhelming, she admitted. I feel like I am being fitted into someone else's life. He nodded. That's normal. She dropped onto the couch. You say that like you've done it before. I have, Damien said quietly. She looked at him. With whom? He hesitated. Myself, he said. Over and over. She absorbed that. They ate dinner quietly. Later, Sophia wandered onto the terrace, city air cool against her skin. Damien joined her after a few minutes, 2 glasses in hand. Wine? He asked. Yes, she said. Please. They stood side by side, looking out at the lights. This view never gets old, Sophia said. No, Damien agreed. It reminds you how small you are. She glanced at him. You don't strike me as someone who likes feeling small. I don't, he said, but I need it sometimes. She sipped her wine. To remember you're human? Yes. They stood in silence, comfortable now in a way that surprised her. Can I ask you something personal? Sophia said. You've already married me, he said lightly. I think that door is open. She smiled faintly. Why did your grandmother insist on marriage? Damien exhaled slowly. She believed love was discipline, he said. That commitment forced people to grow where comfort let them stagnate. And do you believe that? He looked at her, really looked at her. I'm beginning to wonder, he said. The air shifted. Sophia felt it, something unspoken pressing between them. She set her glass down. I should go to bed, she said quietly. Damien nodded. Yes, he didn't follow. She lay awake again that night, staring into darkness, aware of his presence somewhere beyond the wall, aware of her own heartbeat, aware that pretending was already getting harder. The next morning, she received a call. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Sophia Bennett, a man's voice said. This is Richard Blackwood. Her stomach dropped. I believe, he continued smoothly, we should talk about the circumstances of your marriage. Sophia's hand tightened around the phone. Yes, she said carefully. I believe we should. As the line went quiet for a moment, one thought rang clear in her mind. The test had officially begun. Sophia didn't tell Damien right away. She stood in the quiet of her bedroom, phone still warm in her hand, staring at the city as if the answer might be written somewhere between the buildings. Richard Blackwood. The name carried weight, not loud weight, the kind that pressed slowly, deliberately, until you noticed you were struggling to breathe. She replayed his voice in her head, polite, smooth, certain. Man who expected access. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed and forced herself to slow down. Panic wouldn't help her. Panic had never helped her. She changed clothes, choosing jeans and a soft sweater instead of anything Elena might have approved. She needed to feel like herself before facing anyone who thought she was a weak link. When she stepped into the living room, Damien was already there, jacket off, reading something on his tablet. He looked up immediately. You're quiet, he said. I got a call, Sophia replied. His posture changed, not alarmed, but alert. From whom? She didn't soften it. Your uncle. Damien set the tablet down slowly. What did he say? He said he wanted to talk about the circumstances of our marriage. Damien exhaled through his nose, a controlled release. That didn't take long. No, Sophia said. It didn't. He studied her face. Are you all right? I think so, she said honestly. But I didn't answer him yet. That was wise. She crossed her arms, bracing herself. I assume you don't want me to talk to him alone. I don't want him to think you're isolated, Damien corrected. There's a difference. Sophia nodded. So what do we do? Damien stood and walked toward the window, hands clasped behind his back. We don't avoid him, he said. Avoidance invites suspicion. She joined him, keeping a careful distance. And if he tries to intimidate me, Damien's gaze hardened. He won't succeed. That's not the same thing as won't try. A corner of his mouth lifted. No, it's not. They stood in silence for a moment, the city humming below. I need to know something, Sophia said quietly. Yes. If this gets ugly, she continued, if he pushes, if this threatens my job or my family, will you still think this was worth it? Damien turned to face her fully. Yes, he said without hesitation. But I won't let it cost you more than you agreed to give. Something in his certainty steadied her. Okay, she said. Then I'll call him back. Damien nodded. Put him on speaker. Sophia inhaled, then tapped the screen. It rang once. Twice. Sophia, Richard Blackwood said smoothly. I was hoping you'd return my call. I didn't want to be rude, Sophia replied evenly. But I also didn't want to be unprepared. A brief pause. I appreciate caution, Richard said. It suggests intelligence. Sophia didn't respond to that. I imagine this transition has been overwhelming, Richard continued. One moment you're a guest, the next you're a Blackwood. I imagine you imagine a lot, Sophia said calmly. Damon's lips twitched. Richard chuckled softly. Straightforward. I like that. So tell me, how did you and my nephew meet? Sophia answered without hesitation. At a charity event. 6 months ago, and he fell in love. Richard asked. Sophia glanced at Damien, then back to the phone. We got to know each other, she said. We chose commitment. Richard hummed. Interesting phrasing. Damien stepped closer, his presence a quiet reinforcement. Richard, Damien said, voice calm but unmistakably firm. If you have questions, ask them directly. Very well, Richard replied. Sophia, what exactly do you want from this marriage? Sophia felt the question settle deep. She could lie. She could deflect out instead. She chose something harder. Stability, she said. Respect. And the freedom to remain myself. Another pause. Honest, Richard said. Refreshing. Sophia didn't trust the compliment. I'll be in New York next week, Richard continued. I'd like to have dinner. The three of us. Damien answered before Sophia could. That can be arranged. Good, Richard said. I look forward to getting to know my new niece. The call ended. Sophia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Well, she said lightly. He's charming. Damon's expression was unreadable. He's testing you. Did I pass? For now, Damien said. She turned to him. You don't seem surprised. I expected this, he replied. What I didn't expect was how well you'd handle it. Sophia shrugged. I've dealt with landlords and bosses who thought intimidation was a management style. That earned her a real smile. Dinner with your uncle, she said. That sounds like fun in a very specific kind of nightmare way. It will be strategic, Damien said. But I'll be there. She met his gaze. I'm not doing this alone. No, he agreed. You're not. That night, Sophia dreamed of long tables and watchful eyes, of questions wrapped in politeness and answers that mattered more than they seemed. When she woke, she knew something had shifted. This was no longer just about surviving a year. It was about whether she could stand her, ground in a world that had already decided what she was worth and whether Damien Blackwood would stand with her when it counted. Sophia finished the call and set her phone on the kitchen counter. She didn't sigh. She didn't pace. She simply stood there, hands resting on the stone surface, feeling the quiet settle. Damien watched her without interrupting. He didn't raise his voice, she said at last. That's what bothered me most. Damien nodded. Richard never raises his voice when he thinks he has leverage. She crossed her arms, more habit than defense. He didn't threaten me, she went on. He just wanted to know who I am. That is the threat, Damien said. Sophia turned to face him. Then be honest with me, not the CEO version. How much damage can he really do? Damien didn't answer immediately. He moved to the window. looked out over the city for a few seconds, then spoke. He can challenge the will. He can create doubt. He can suggest this marriage is convenient rather than sincere. A pause. What he can't do is prove intent. Sophia tilted her head slightly. Because we're legally married. Exactly. She let out a short, humorless breath. I never thought that sentence would make me feel safer. Damien looked at her then, something less calculated in his expression. I didn't expect you to handle the call the way you did. How did you expect me to handle it? More defensive, he said. Or more strategic. He studied her. You were clear. That unsettles people like him. Sophia nodded slowly. I don't want to play power games. You don't have to, Damien said. You just have to be consistent. And if I don't want to be, she asked. Not challenging. Just tired. Damien understood the difference. Then we say so, he replied. And we adjust. She searched his face. Do you always leave room to adjust? No, he admitted. But with you, it would be a mistake not to. That stopped her. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was respectful, and that mattered more than she'd expected. Later, they sat at the kitchen table. No candles. No ceremony. Just tea and leftover pizza, reheated and imperfect. This, Sophia said, gesturing around them, doesn't look like what people imagine. Good, Damien replied. Other people's expectations are usually noise. She looked at him thoughtfully. And yours? He considered that you don't disappear into this, he said, and that we don't pretend more than necessary. Sophia nodded. I can do that. She stood to leave, then paused. Damien, yes. Thank you for not speaking for me today. He met her gaze. Thank you for not needing me to. She went to her room and closed the door gently behind her. The apartment settled into silence again. Not an empty silence. Not a tense one. A silence filled with things still forming. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled. This year had begun with a mistake. It had turned into a contract. And now it felt like something quieter, heavier, more deliberate. She didn't know if love would come of it, but she knew this much. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't being pulled along by circumstances. She was choosing how to stand inside them. And that, she realized as she lay back and let the city hum beyond the glass, was enough to begin with. Sophia woke before dawn, not from anxiety this time, but from a quiet certainty that had been building for weeks. The city outside the windows was still dark, the skyline soft and forgiving. Damien slept in his room down the hall, the distance between them unchanged, respectful, intentional. Their year had passed more quickly than she had expected, not because it had been easy, but because it had been full. Dinners that started as obligations and ended in real conversations. Public events where they learned each other's rhythms without rehearsing. Long nights of work for him, quiet creative mornings for her. Silences that grew comfortable instead of strained. And the one thing they'd both sworn not to let happen. Feelings. Sophia dressed simply and walked into the kitchen. Damien was already there, coffee in hand, reading something on his tablet. You're up early, he said. So are you. He looked at her more closely. You're calm. I know, she said. That's how I realized it was time. He set the tablet down. Today, he said. Yes. The divorce papers were ready. Lawyers had been efficient, respectful, clinical, exactly as planned. They sat across from each other at the table where so many quiet decisions had been made. For the record, Damien said, the board meeting is this afternoon. Richard's challenge was formally denied. Sophia nodded. So you're safe. The company is, he corrected. She smiled faintly. You too. He studied her. Are you still leaving? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had once overwhelmed her and now felt navigable. When we started this, she said, I thought the hardest part would be pretending. Damien listened. It wasn't, she continued. The hardest part was realizing I didn't feel like I was pretending anymore. His breath changed. Just slightly. I didn't want to fall into something I couldn't choose freely, she said. I needed to know that if I stayed, it would be because I wanted to, not because I was afraid of losing what this life gave me. Damien stood. Sophia, he said quietly, I won't ask you to stay. She turned to face him. I know, she said. That's why this matters. She walked back to the table and picked up the envelope with the finalized agreement. $10 million. Freedom. Clean exit. She slid it toward him. I'm not signing. Today, Damon's eyes searched her face. Because you're unsure? No, she said. Because I'm sure. Silence settled between them. Not tense. Not heavy. Honest. Double quotes. You once asked me what I wanted beyond money, Sophia said. I didn't know then. She met his gaze. Now I do. He didn't interrupt. I want a life that feels chosen every day, she said. Not perfect. Not safe. Just real. Damien nodded slowly. And does that life include me? Sophia exhaled. Yes, she said. But only if it includes me too. He stepped closer, careful, like he had from the beginning. It does, he said. If you stay, it's not as an arrangement. Not as a solution. Then as what? She asked. As partners, he said. Again, but this time without an end date. She studied his face, the man who had learned control as survival, who had offered her structure when she needed stability and space when she needed dignity. Okay, she said. Then here are my terms. His mouth curved faintly. I assumed there would be some. I keep my work, she said. My name. My independence. Agreed. And when things get hard, she added, we don't manage them. We talk. He nodded. Agreed. She paused. And we don't stay together out of obligation. Damon's voice was steady. Never. Sophia held his gaze for a long moment. Then she reached for his hand. Not dramatic. Not rushed. Just real. The ceremony they didn't have came later. No cathedral. No cameras. No audience. Just a quiet afternoon at City Hall. A handful of witnesses. And vows that weren't perfect but were honest. Months later, Sophia stood in her studio, light pouring over half-finished work. Damien leaned in the doorway, jacket off, watching her with the ease of someone who no longer feared stillness. You ready? He asked. In a minute, she said. I want to finish this. He nodded. Take your time. She smiled. That was the difference. Not the money. Not the power. Not the life she'd stepped into by accident, but the fact that she could take her time and still be met where she stood. Sophia had walked into the wrong chapel and found herself married to a stranger. She stayed not because she had to, but because in the end, she chose him. And he chose her, not as a solution, not as a contract, but as a life they were both willing to keep choosing.